distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Deepika Shetty, Press Officer of the European Union Delegation to Singapore, and it is really my honor to be your MC this afternoon. Today's outreach event is possible thanks to the cooperation of the EU Delegation to Singapore, the EU's Directorate General for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology, DG Connect, Singapore's Ministry of Trade and Industry, and Ministry of Communications and Information. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded. We encourage you to tweet and do social media posts on the discussion. And please do remember to post your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. To kickstart our discussion, it is my privilege to invite Her Excellency Ivona Piorko, European Union Ambassador to Singapore, to deliver her welcome remarks. Ambassador, the virtual floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika. Warm welcome to everyone, especially to my good friend, Ambassador Lim Hong Kwai, and colleagues from the Singaporean ministries, and obviously very good colleagues and friends from European Commission and everyone else. I'm really happy that so many people have been able to join us. I always repeat that, but probably never too little, that Singapore and European Union are very strong partners in every dimension, also in challenging times and challenging dimensions. In anything we do nowadays, we do remember about the Russian aggression of Ukraine and about the fact that Singapore and many, many other countries in the world are defending the UN Charter and international rules order, and that support is very important. However, this partnership is obviously also very present in any other area, and digital is here no exception. I would even say it at the front of it. It's clearly been maybe number one, clearly one of the very key dimensions and priorities on which we have worked together with the Singaporean authorities, European colleagues across these recent months. I might anecdote it clearly has been my number one dimension since I arrived here 10 months ago. And maybe most importantly, it is a very important area of cooperation for our political leaders, both on the European side. EVP Vestager, Commissioner Breton, EVP Dombrovskis have been very present. We just had a very successful, my congrats go to MCI Asia Tech conference here, with good participation of and so a very successful trade committee with digital dimension back in December, thanks to cooperation of our leaders with Minister Iswaran and Minister Teo, and among others, many thanks from our side. If I would have to say what the EU and Singapore partnership digital is supposed to do, it is supposed to bring our relationship to a next level, so it is fit for future. And my colleagues, especially Director Kleiner, will be able to explain it in much more details. Briefly speaking, digitalization is also a key enabler for sustainability, which is another really key political dimension of our cooperation, the greening of our industries, of our societies, of our life on both sides. But it is also an area where tensions are tangible across the planet, and therefore multilateral governance and bilateral partnerships among like-minded countries like ours, or like-minded regions, is very important. It is for this reason that in our Indo-Pacific strategy for cooperation, and I always stress this word cooperation, we have enumerated 3 countries with which we really would like to advance as fast and as deep as possible, and these are Japan, Republic of Korea, and Singapore. We've just advanced in Japan, and we are just doing this very same thing right now with Singapore. But what this partnership will be about is not only in the hands of officials and politicians, but above all stakeholders, those that join us today and those that will have the occasion to pronounce themselves in other areas, because only then this digital partnership will be successful when it's useful, operational, down to earth, etc. So the success of it is really in your hands. So I'm here really very happy to be able to listen to this discussion, and I wish you the best for it. Thank you very much.
Fit for Future. Thank you, Ambassador Purecore, for reminding us of the importance of the event and of the future EU-Singapore digital partnership, and of course, a very apt reminder of the very challenging times that we continue to be in globally. Ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me great pleasure to invite on our virtual stage His Excellency Lim Hong Wai, Singapore Ambassador to the European Union. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you very much, Deepika. Your Excellency, Ambassador Ioana Purecore, dear colleagues, good morning to those in Europe and good afternoon to those in Singapore. I'm very happy to join all of you today for this outreach session on the EU-Singapore Digital Partnership. Singapore and EU shares long-standing ties across a broad spectrum of relations, including in the economic ties as well. Our economies are deeply intertwined, underpinned by strong trade, investment, and people-to-people ties. And the numbers, I think, speak for themselves. The EU is Singapore's fourth largest trading partner for goods, second largest trading partner for services, and in turn, Singapore is the EU's largest ASEAN trading partner for both goods and services. Notably, Singapore also serves as a launchpad for EU companies to access opportunities across the region in Southeast Asia and beyond. It is therefore, I think, imperative that we take this bilateral partnership into the digital realm. Digitization has transformed both businesses, trades, and societies. And in both our regions, the digital economy is growing rapidly. The value of Southeast Asia's digital economy is expected to more than triple between 2020 and 2025, from 90 billion euros to over 320 billion euros, while the EU's digital economy is expected to boost GDP by over 14% in 2030. Therefore, as our digital economies grow, I think we need to work together to shape digital rules, standards, and facilitate interoperability, including cross-border data flows in trusted and secure manners. And therefore, we need to work together to create a conducive, secure, and enabling environment for the digital economy to thrive. This digital partnership, therefore, is a very important endeavor for all of us. It will serve as an overarching framework that will allow Singapore and the EU to cooperate across a wide range of areas through different modalities in the digital realm, such as through dialogues, MOUs, binding commitments. And on this point, I would like to echo what Ambassador Purecore has said about digitization being a driver for sustainability, in that it is a very, very important tool that allows us to achieve both our green agendas and our green objectives. Our shared goal is a digital partnership that is ambitious, comprehensive, and tangible. Ambitious in establishing high standards that would surpass Singapore and the EU's existing bilateral, plurilateral agreements and initiatives, and will help to contribute to the global rules being negotiated at the WTO and elsewhere, for instance, on the Joint Statement Initiative on e-commerce. Comprehensive in scope to address the full spectrum of digital issues, and tangible in achieving concrete outcomes that will benefit businesses and citizens. Discussions on the digital partnership are well underway, as all of us know, and the teams, I think, will later in this webinar share some ideas and thoughts on our plans for the digital partnership. And they will be very interested, all of us will be very interested to hear from all of you as well on how the partnership could be of use to you and your businesses. And your feedback will help us design a digital partnership that will benefit our businesses, communities, and all of us more comprehensively. And therefore, I look forward to the discussions a bit later on, and I wish all of you a very productive session. Thank you.
Shared goal towards a conducive, secure, enabling environment. Thank you, Ambassador Lim Hong Wai, for your insightful words and mapping the road towards the future. And now it is time for us to hear from Director Thibaut Kleiner, Director of Policy, Strategy and Outreach from DG Connect, who is connecting from Brussels. He will share with us the state of play of the EU-Singapore Digital Partnership. Good morning and a very warm welcome, Director Kleiner, and I hand the floor to you.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, dear colleague, friends from both Singapore and Europe, from Brussels indeed. And I'm really happy to be with you today. It's an important milestone also in the preparation of our digital partnership. And I think today we are really looking forward to hearing from the participants about their views in terms of what we should achieve with this partnership. And sometimes I get the question, why is it that the EU, with more than 450 million inhabitants, the largest single market worldwide, is interested in working with Singapore so deeply? After all, it's true that the Singapore economy is much smaller, and you may question, okay, why are we spending so much time trying to dedicate ourselves to this digital partnership? And the answer is quite simple. Singapore is really today, in many ways, a leading partner already in terms of implementing and adopting digital technologies. It is also a partner that is the entry door for the Indo-Pacific, and Singapore has an important role within ASEAN, but also it is a country with whom we believe we can develop global standards. And that's very much the name of the game also in the digital world. The more we can develop common standards, common norms and regulation, the more we can strive and make sure that our businesses benefit. And this was very much what drove also already the discussions that kick-started these efforts between our leaders, Minister Iswaran and Commissioner Breton. Back in February, they already reached an agreement to launch these efforts. And in a nutshell, the partnership is really something that should be seen as an overarching framework. So it is not as such a trade agreement where we spell out everything, where we have legal binding commitments, but it is really a living tool, an instrument for us on both sides to work together more effectively, and also to make sure that deliver, which is really for us in the EU important. It's nice to talk, it's even better if you can deliver concrete projects, concrete results. And to that extent, we were already happy that between the minister and the commissioner, they could flag some areas where we can work together effectively, issues like secure and sustainable infrastructure, but also trusted data flows, data innovation, digital regulations, but also issues like digital skills and transformation of businesses, including SMEs and public services. This is part of what we also have in the EU as our strategy for 2030, what we call the digital compass, where we try to improve in many of these areas. So the partnership, in essence, is there to as a facilitation to expand also our bilateral trade and investment, but it's also there to make sure that we cooperate with businesses to support innovation and also to open up new areas in terms of digital development and cooperation. So that's what we hope we can achieve. And really, partnership aims to establish now, I would say, a flexible architecture. The idea to be oriented to results. So we want to be flexible enough to accommodate issues. It's not, as I was saying, a binding instrument as such, but nevertheless, it's a strong commitment, something we want to sign up to. We want to make sure also that in the EU, our member states fully support and endorse our activities. We want to make sure that we also work between EU and Singapore through precise groups and structure so that this in the end leads to tangible results. It could be in the form of MOUs, in the form of dialogues, or maybe even updates in our EU-Singapore free trade agreement, which, as you know, has been extremely successful over the past years. So now just with the next slide to show you a little bit the kind of cycle we have in mind about this partnership. The idea is really that we should organize ourselves, involving also our stakeholders, if you could show the next slide, so that you as private partners, also as academics, sometimes we want also to hear from you and make sure that we can channel this flow of information into a very efficient process. So the idea is that on top of our relationship, there could be EU-Singapore summit meeting at the heads of state level. We don't have this with Singapore today, but we have it with ASEAN. So that could be really the place where we crystallize our efforts. But then we would prepare the digital partnership activities with this annual meeting of the Digital Partnership Council. So that's really one of the big novelties in our approach. We want to have political level endorsement and oversight. And very often, that's the key to make things happen, to make sure that the top level is involved, can give the steer in terms of priorities, but can also make sure that things happen and very concretely. So that's really the cornerstone of what we want to have every year. And to prepare this Digital Partnership Council, we plan to use what we already have in terms of dialogues or instruments. This could be, for instance, the free trade agreement committees that are already in place, but there could be also other dialogues that we have between EU and Singapore in the area of finance, also of data flows, of sharing experience with SMEs and the like, that already exist. So the idea is not to reinvent the wheel, but to build on this and to make sure that we feed into these instruments, thanks to indeed digital policy dialogue at the level of DG Connect, for instance, but also specialist workshops. And that's where you, as stakeholders, would have opportunities to also participate. So essentially, you see this cycle every year. We want to make sure that we make progress, we advance on certain areas, we zoom in on things that relate to concrete projects, and we get the feedback from the leaders to encourage us to go deeper, to continue, or sometimes to stop when they think that we have not, or we have either achieved, or rather the ball is rolling to other areas. So it's really a living instrument, a living tool, but really dedicated to impact and dedicated to delivering concrete results. So now, and that would be my concluding message. Next slide. How can you be involved at this stage? I mean, we want to make sure that business will benefit. And this means that we want to make sure that when we scope our activities, this is really on us where you can really make a difference, because it helps your business, it helps you issues you may have in terms of EU-Singapore activities. And therefore, we have opened this channel for consultation. Please message to the email address, DG Connect, and also the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Feel free to send the same message or different messages to the two entities. At the end of the day, we will take this into account to help us finalize our efforts. We want to have a first draft very soon of this digital partnership. You see that we just concluded something similar with Japan, and we would like to move forward with Singapore as our next partner to conclude this digital partnership very soon. So I thank you very much for your attention and hope that we can already today hear from stakeholders, from business partners, and hear even more from you through this written consultation that we hope you can participate into. Many thanks.
A flexible architecture oriented towards results. We heard the word tangible results, and Director Cleaner has stressed very much the importance for dialogue, and that is what we are encouraging in the session that we are having today. Thank you, Director Cleaner, for this very informative presentation that you've had. I'd like to remind all our participants that we really do want to hear from you. Please do make use of the 2 emails that you just saw. But more than that, in this session, if you could start posing your questions already, we will be directing them to our panelists shortly. Before addressing your questions, it is now time to hear views from 2 representatives of European and Singapore industry associations. First, I invite Mr. Antonio Ferraco, Chair of the Digital Economy Committee of EuroCham Singapore. He shares with us the results of a survey on digital economy that was recently concluded by EuroCham Singapore. Mr. Ferraco, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepika. Good afternoon and good morning to all the participants and to the speakers that are sharing with me this session. As you heard from Deepika, I'm the chairman of the Digital Economy Committee, which was created and is centered around the topic of digital transformation, a trend that rises in the last 2-3 years. Our objectives are to share the experience and learnings about transforming the different business models, leadership styles among all business leaders from different sectors, to provide a forum for the implications and opportunities of the new technologies, and establishing a first of its kind cross-sectoral platforms. We are having many initiatives that are cross-sectoral, also with other of the committees, and mainly also with the Sustainability Committee. This year, we launched the Digital Economy Program, and we ran also a survey to this program, which I will share some of the results in immediately. In this program, we highlight the multidimensional aspect of data that I believe is also the key of the DEA between EU and Singapore, and how the use of the IoT has strong implication, not just only for trade and economic development, but also for human rights, peace, and security. It also has an angle on how frontier technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence can empower digital transformation. It also explores how handling of data may greatly affect our ability to achieve the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Digitalization has and will continue to transform the business model and trade. This is why some outcome of the surveys highlighted the importance of regulations to support and to reduce barriers on cross-border trade. European Digital Economy Committee, we are very mindful of the importance of continuously identifying digital trade elements for this agreement. We aim to be the voice of the European business here in Singapore. The program comprises of a series of activities which focus on 4 main pillars: data-driven economy, including big data, AI, Industry 4.0, and data governance; hyperconnectivity via enabling Internet of Things and cloud and IoT security; digital talent gap, bridging the digital skills gap in the ASEAN region; digital for sustainability and the use of technology in everyday business and as enabler to reach our SDGs goals. This survey was conducted by the European Chamber of Commerce with locally operational European organizations and other Eurocham members. We are very active in the digital sector. This survey highlights the organization's recognitions of the digital trend in Singapore and exposes some of the key challenges that they encounter while operating. One of the main intentions was to raise the awareness in the digitalizations of business to advocate for a DEA, Digital Economy Agreement, between the EU and the Singapore government. Let me deep dive a little bit within the results of the survey that we conducted. We've been able to listen from between 50 and 60 European members, 10% coming from the automotive sector, 14% from consulting, 11% almost from financial sector, another 40% divided by F&B or semicon or other strong manufacturers here in Singapore. More of the 60% of the respondents were at C-level, so strong stakeholders and senior management. What we've been asking is that after the COVID, because we strongly believe that the COVID increased the digitalization pace of adoption, we asked if they agreed if they agreed that the customer demand for online purchasing on a cross-border will keep being relevant, and the 92% said yes. While others were asked about the use of digital technologies, advanced technology in their operations, 89% of them confirmed that these operations will keep on being used. While lower percentage said 80% said yes, that these advanced technologies will keep on supporting them in decision making. While another trend, it was the interest of migrating towards the cloud. 87.5% said that this strategy will help them to increase their digitalization level. Another trend that rise from the respondents, it was the spending on data security, allocating budget to the cybersecurity aspect of digitalization. The 84% of respondents said yes, that they will keep on allocating budget to this trend. Also, these digitalization trends will help and keep on helping the engagement from the various employees. We also asked which business areas in your organization are being impacted the most by this digital transformation. And two of the majority of the areas was customer service, operation and maintenance, as well as mobility, with a relatively 19%, 16%, and 11%. What we asked also was the correlation between the digital initiatives and the sustainability goals. And the 66% said that these digital initiatives are strictly correlated or used as an enabler to achieve the sustainability goal as mentioned earlier. In terms of the digital economy agreement, we also asked to the respondents if a regulatory framework, a regulatory fragmentation in the digital sphere is a significant barrier to the international trade. And well, more than the 70% agreed and strongly agreed. We also asked that if a digital economy agreement between EU and Singapore will facilitate better access to the digital economy by aligning digital trade rules and make it easier for business to reach new customers. Again, more than the 70%, divided in 54% agreed and 20% strongly agreed, positively responded to this affirmation. Also, in what opinion, in what fields could a digital economy agreement contribute the most? We identified that the 22% enhancing the interoperability of standards for advanced technology, encourage 23% also answered like encourage wider adoption of digital technology, enhance legal certainty for business, another 22%, enhance customer protection, another 21%, and 11% highlighted the enhancement resilience technology in the supply chain. As one of the last topics we wanted to scout, we asked in their opinion which elements should be covered in a digital economy agreement between the EU and Singapore in order of importance. And the first is the business and trade facilitation, followed by treatment of digital products, followed by data concerns, and business and consumers trust. And then standards for emerging trends and technology, data inclusion, transparency, dispute settlement, and consumer data protection. With this, I would like to conclude telling that as for Japan, the aim of the partnership should be to expand the bilateral trade and investment relationship between enhancing the cooperation and interoperability of standards between Singapore and the EU. Thank you.
Towards an EU-Singapore digital partnership, Mr. Farago, thank you very much for sharing with us the positive response this has already received and for the deep dive into the survey on digital economy that was recently concluded by Eurocham Singapore. And now I kindly invite on our virtual stage, Mr. Rajesh Pal Singh. Mr. Singh is the Director for Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships at SG Tech. SG Tech is the leading trade association for Singapore's tech industry. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ibika. Good afternoon to colleagues from Singapore and good morning to colleagues from the EU. So my name is Raj and I represent the Tech Trade Association of Singapore, SG Tech, and I'll be sharing with you a broad introduction of the opportunity the region of Southeast Asia presents and where Singapore sits in that, who we are as an association, and more importantly, some early ideas from our membership in SG Tech of what this digital partnership could look at. So jumping straight into it, the next slide. Sorry, I think you missed a few slides. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so jumping straight into it. So Singapore sits at the heart of the booming Southeast Asian region, which is adding an average of 40 million new internet users each year. Currently, it's at 440 million internet users, where 8 in 10 of the users are also digital consumers, where they transact some way online, and where the total internet economy is also expected to cross US $1 trillion by 2030 in gross value. Moving to the next slide. Singapore sits, I think the slides are jumping. Apologies for that. But Singapore sits at the very center of this growth in Southeast Asia, where we house the largest capacity of data centers to support the digitalization of the whole Asian region. And our ICT sector in Singapore alone contributes to grow in terms of GDP contribution and employment, where the sector contributes around 5% of GDP and employs 5% of the total workforce here. So going into a bit more of SG Tech, if you go to the next slide. Yeah. Apologies, the slide seems to be jumping. So we are an association that has been around for 40 years, and we represent over 1,000 members. And these are some of the members we represent, but it's a nexus of companies from the West, companies from the East, companies large and small. And if you go on to the next few slides, essentially on the organization structure of the kind of companies that actually talk to us, we have companies in the AI space, in the high computing space, cybersecurity, cloud and data centers, digital trust, education, and gaming. And some of the key, the top 3 areas that really matter to us as a tech body at the moment. The first is what we call digital trust. It's how do we actually build this sense of trust in the digital space. And that's one of the key areas that we look at, where we are doing a lot of work with regard to research and studies, events and outreach. And what you see on screen now is one of the projects that we are currently doing, where we are trying to define this element of digital trust and essentially provide recommendations, not just for leaders in Singapore, but across the region, of what we can do as an industry, as a nation, and a region, of how we can foster this sense of digital trust to foster cross-border trade, cross-border data flows, and also safeguard consumer interests as well. So if you move on to the next slide. And we are doing a lot of work as well in the region, where we collaborate with the likes of APEC, for example, to kind of get the views of what digital trust means to this region. And right now it's the early stages where we are actually trying to define this issue and what this can mean in terms of policy recommendations. Moving on, I think one of the key events we are doing towards the end of the year in October is organizing the world's first Digital Trust Global Forum. And this will be an event that will be attended by policymakers, industry leaders, where we talk about the key issues surrounding digital trust, whether they are in the area of digital identity, privacy preserving technologies, regulation, and it's to start this broader conversation of what trust means to us as an industry, and how we can get the companies to actually embody this and ensure that customers' data, consumers' data is protected, and data are not just localized, but it can flow freely across companies, across platforms, and across borders, so that it can really stimulate digital trade. And the last section of my slides, we talk about some of the ideas of what the industry feels can be considered by both parties when both the EU and Singapore enter into negotiation. Firstly, we think that as far as possible, our respective data architectures must be interoperable to allow data to flow and to enable digital transactions. To help identify opportunities for such data flows, we think it's important for industry to be plugged in as both parties negotiate, and this should not just be a G2G exclusive exercise. And industry must be able to kind of be plugged into this exercise. As such, as the tech body, we are very happy as SG Tech to kind of get into partnership with our equivalent in the EU to be better plugged into this exercise, so that the businesses' views across both parties, the EU and Singapore, can be best represented. We also think we'll need to adopt a whiteboard approach to identify safe spaces where we can sandbox promising use cases as opposed to trying to see how respective data architectures and rules can be applied to the other party. In that regard, we are happy that Singapore is participating in the Global Cross-Border Privacy Rules Initiative, for which Singapore is co-chairing a work group. And EduTech is actually co-chairing the work group in the APEC Business Advisory Council too. So that could be another opportunity for both parties to explore. And the slide that you see on screen right now, and that's really our second bucket of ideas, where we hope to look at opportunities where both parties can unlock efficiencies. And two areas we have identified in these initial stages. The first being mutual access to ICT government procurement and opportunities to ease access of tech talent to flow freely across both geographies to stimulate both tech ecosystems. This will not just help to unlock efficiencies, but foster deeper B2B and people-to-people connections, which will be the foundation on which our digital partnership will prosper. And in the next slide, the third bucket of ideas is to consider the role of game-changing technologies that can open new forms of collaboration and interactions across both geographies, where the two ecosystems can better fuse for a global marketplace. Technologies such as digital identity and privacy-preserving technologies are two such areas that could be looked at to deepen the interactions in this partnership. We have seen some early success with our SingPass being accepted by the EU for EU COVID vaccine certificates. So the beachhead for more opportunities has already been established. So it's really now for us to go and kind of explore the other areas of opportunity. And lastly, as our digital partnership is meant to be a living document, we think there needs to be a mechanism where the private sector on both sides can better provide ground-up feedback to help guide the identification of opportunities and threats on an ongoing basis during the negotiation phase of this partnership and even post-agreement. Finally, EduTech is doing some work in the space of digital trust, like I mentioned earlier, and this looks at the totality of all aspects from regulation to tech solutions, to cybersecurity, to the skills of our people in this space, and how these can all be enablers of better trust in our digital world where data can flow and consumers' data protected at all times. In this regard, we are open to host delegations from the EU for our Global Forum Digital Trust on the 28th of October, which is also supported by the APEC Business Advisory Council. And this will be in the week-long Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology in end October. Furthermore, we'll be releasing our inaugural study on digital trust in the coming weeks, which will be a forward-looking study on what policymakers and industry leaders can do to foster an age of greater trust in our digital space. And that's my concluding point. I think the main thing is, industry really looks forward to kind of be better plugged into this space and to support the negotiation and finally the agreement of the partnership. Thank you so much.
Ideas for the EU-Singapore digital partnership, stressing new forms of collaboration. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for useful reflections for our panelists for the next session that's coming up. This is going to be a moderated Q&A, and to answer your questions, we have three excellent panelists. We bring back Mr. Thibaut Kleiner, Director of Policy, Strategy and Outreach at DG Connect, Mr. Chua Shun Leong, Director of North America and Europe Division at the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Singapore, and Mr. Eric Chua, Director of International Affairs Division, Singapore's Ministry of Communications and Information. Before I open up the questions, we've received a few already. May I please request Shun Leong and Mr. Chua if you'd like to say a few words on the EU-Singapore digital partnership. First, Shun Leong.
Thanks very much, Deepika. I wanted to start by first thanking the teams for putting together this wonderful session, for us to be able to reach out and have a direct conversation with members of the industry and to hear directly from you. So many thanks to EUDEL, to DG Connect colleagues, to my own team, of course, and also to MCI colleagues, and very importantly, to Eurocham, SGTech, as well as SBF. And I'm also very glad to share this panel today with Thibaut as well as Eric. All three of us are working very closely together. Here in Singapore, the digital partnership is a work stream and initiative that is driven jointly by MTI as well as MCI. I think Thibault has already given a very comprehensive and useful overview of what the EU-Singapore Digital Partnership is about and what we intend to achieve. I just wanted to mention that whatever we do is really about ensuring that it's useful to businesses. And I wanted to reinforce and support Thibault's point that this is meant to be a living instrument, a living framework, where the governments work closely side by side together with industry to make sure that whatever we do is useful and supportive of your efforts to expand economic activities in the digital economy space. That's it from me, and I'm going to pass it on to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Shen Long and Deepika. And very glad to be here on this panel with good friends from Singapore, Shen Long, and also with Thibault at DG Connect. Of course, with our excellencies, our ambassadors, as well as industry stakeholders. Thank you all for organizing and participating in this event with us. I think the partnership between Singapore and EU is growing from strength to strength. Of course, we have collaborated in important areas on cross-border trade. There is, of course, new and emerging areas that we would like to connect and be more interoperable on, so that our businesses can also leverage the opportunities in the digital economy from both sides, from EU and in Singapore. I'll share more thoughts later, but thank you very much for having me on this panel.
Thanks for that. So we have quite a few questions coming in, and I'm going to deep dive with the very first one. This question is, what are the concrete opportunities that would arise from the EU-Singapore digital partnership, and how can businesses benefit from it? Shen Long, maybe have you start with your reflections first, followed by Director Cleaner, and then with you, Mr. Chua. Over to you.
Thanks, Deepika. Happy to share a couple of thoughts. I think there are many concrete benefits for companies depending on what you do and depending on your size, actually. So for example, in the case of end-to-end digital trade, there's a lot of potential for the EU and Singapore to work together to digitize a lot of existing trade transactions that are happening today. There are various estimates out there about how paper-based transactions are highly inefficient and involve many paper-based documents. So that very low hanging fruit, I think, in terms of having digital trade documentation, that already is a big benefit in terms of reducing costs and improving and enhancing efficiencies for businesses. So that's just one example. A second example is that within the digital economy, the flow of data and the ability to analyze it is highly critical. Between the EU and Singapore, there is scope for us to figure out how to ensure connectivity and interoperability of data frameworks as well. And for Singapore here, we represent essentially a region with various approaches to data as well. So for the EU to connect with Singapore, that would almost essentially mean that you'll then be able to connect with the rest of the region. Of course, the benefits to companies is immense. What this means, for example, for European MNCs, is that you can work very closely with your subsidiaries here in Singapore, which are very interested to expand across the rest of the region. These are just two examples in terms of end-to-end digital trade, as well as in terms of data flows, ensuring that our data frameworks are interoperable. I'm just going to pause here and turn it over to the other members of the panel.
Maybe, Deepika, I can also complement. I fully agree already with what was said, but I also think that in the digital area, a lot is also about norms, about rules and regulations. And for instance, a few weeks ago, the EU has just come to an agreement on how platforms, online platforms, should be regulated. That's the Digital Services Act. this will have implications for big, but also for small operators in the EU. And of course, these rules, can also be applied in other jurisdictions. And I think that if we can limit or even eliminate differences between the rules that apply in the EU and those that apply in Singapore, it makes life a lot easier for companies that have subsidiaries in the two regions, but also it makes it easier to even advocate for similar approaches on a global basis. And I think that's also for business a big advantage, being based in Singapore, that you can have the benefit of basically the region in Southeast Asia as well as towards Europe. So that's really a concrete element. I would also mention that there are programs running. The EU is also funding research activities, supporting the development of skills. And this is something where also we can put on the table to facilitate joint efforts in terms of research and innovation, making sure that we exchange also more in terms, for instance, of researchers being able to travel from one region to the other, and maybe also making sure that in terms of talent development, we learn from each other and we also organize that we improve collectively.
Thank you very much for that. And over to you, Eric.
Yes, thank you. I'll add on. I think earlier in his opening remarks, Ambassador Lim talked about having our partnership being ambitious, comprehensive, and tangible. Fully agree with that. And I'd like to illustrate it by 2 points here in terms of the scope and coverage of how we think this digital partnership can benefit companies. First is on both tech and non-tech companies, and large and even small and medium enterprises. In Singapore, and I'm sure as well as in the EU, the tech sector has been a bright spot. During the pandemic, it's grown from strength to strength. In Singapore, from 2016, the annual growth rate is about 9.4% per annum. And there is a lot of opportunities for growth and collaboration in the tech sphere. Even for small and medium enterprises, we are seeing a lot of our enterprises adopting digital solutions. So 3 out of 4 are actually adopting solutions such as e-payments or trade facilitation tools in the digital area. So they are ready for wider collaboration, especially with the EU as well. So there is scope for both large and small companies, tech and non-tech, to be able to participate in the digital partnership. The second is beyond bilateral collaboration between EU and Singapore. I think there is also scope for region-to-region collaboration. I think Rajpal talked about the growth opportunities in Southeast Asia, where Singapore sits. I think $1 trillion by 2030 in terms of the growth of the digital economy. So there are tangible ways that we can facilitate region-to-region collaboration, between Singapore and EU as well. And I can kind of elaborate on some of these tangible mechanisms that the digital partnership can work on subsequently. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for that. I would encourage everyone who's participating today, do pose your questions. You have the tab right there for you. Our next question has come from Sebastian Cortez at the Asian Trade Center, and I'll open it up to all 3 of our panelists. The question is, to date, Singapore has signed digital economy agreements with Chile, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and Korea. What modules or chapters under the EU-Singapore digital partnership might go beyond existing Singapore DEAs?
Hi, Deepika. I'm Shunung here. Happy to take a stab at this question. I think number one, I think between the EU and Singapore, we're still in the midst of developing and fleshing out the scope of what we intend to do. So it's probably a question that I don't yet have the answer on. I'll have to, run a scene from Back to the Future to answer that. So that's number one. Number two, because the architecture for the EU-Singapore digital partnership is going to be different from the digital economy agreements that Singapore has done thus far. So there's definitely scope for the EU and Singapore to work on new issues. For instance, I think a number of us have already mentioned and observed that talent and skills development could very well be something that's useful to look at as well. This particular area is not something that has been tackled at depth in great detail in our previous DEAs, and perhaps it could be something that between the EU and Singapore we can look at.
Thanks for that, Shun Nong, Eric, and Mr. Kriener. Anything else you would like to add to what Shun Nong has just said?
Maybe I can add something. Indeed, I think that the beauty of this digital partnership, as we were already discussing, is that basically it's opening possibilities. It's a space where we can be daring somehow, where we can explore really new areas. And that maybe in the end, enter into more formal or more binding agreements. So I think that's really what we will need to test. As you may know, the EU is also engaged in the region. We have also on trade, some agreements with some of these partners, also with New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, and we are working also with India. So we are also quite active in terms of this formalized trade agreement. But I think our aim with Singapore is to be really at the edge, at the front line of innovation and technology as well, and to see how we can also shape the future rules for the global economy.
I would,
Eric, anything?
yeah, I would quickly add that this domain is moving so quickly. And yes, we have signed a couple of digital economy agreements, but the areas for collaboration also move quickly. And in a sense, we are also developing new tools and toolkits to support our companies. One example is on AI, which is an emerging domain and increasingly being deployed not only in the tech industry, but also the wider economy. So Singapore, we just launched AI Verify product. It's a concept of a trusted AI deployment. And this is an area that could allow tech and non-tech companies to demonstrate the responsible use of AI in terms of transparency and unbiasedness. So that while we pursue the opportunities in the digital economy, we are also cognizant and try to address some of the risks and challenges that come with it.
Thank you. Speaking of opening possibilities, I'm going to try and club two questions. I know slightly different, but I know our panelists would be able to address them adeptly. The first question is, how can businesses and chambers of commerce get involved in the EU-Singapore digital partnership? An equally important question that addresses sustainability issues. How can the digital partnership support the EU and Singapore sustainability objectives? Are there any specific tools that will be created for this? Shun Nong, would you want to go first with this?
Thank you, Deepika. So number one, we are hoping that this digital partnership is not just an agreement, but a platform, a living platform for us to be able to continuously engage with the industry and hear from you directly on how we're going to approach issues. So today's outreach session, a joint one, is but the first of various outreach sessions that we will be having, in the months ahead. The other one is that I think in Thibault's presentation just now, we did have a slide where we established an open channel for stakeholders to write in to both the EU and Singapore. So I really encourage you to make use of that channel to write in directly to us. And then subsequently, you guys know who we are. All three of us are on the screen right now. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. You can contact us through Eurochem, through SGTech, as well as SBF, and also, of course, through the UDEL as well. So quite a lot of avenues for you to get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shun Nong. Eric, if I may pass the floor to you.
I think there is a wide range of tools that we can explore that can be useful for businesses. Ultimately, that's the digital partnership is to pursue opportunities between EU and Singapore. I think as my panelists have also mentioned, the areas of collaboration and digital partnership, we're still working on and in discussion. In terms of what possibilities, what options we could be discussing. In this region, in ASEAN, Singapore, we are trying to also facilitate and enable trusted interoperability. On the data front, we have a tool called the model contractual clauses that allow data flows that are trusted to be implemented between businesses. So these are areas or practical toolkits, that we could be looking at, in areas like data, AI that I mentioned earlier, and other domains.
Thanks. And Mr. Cleaner, if we may very quickly get your thoughts on this as well.
No, very quickly, and I wanted to say something on sustainability, as this was also in the question. I think that sustainability is now intrinsically linked also with digital. I mean, we will not be able to improve our energy consumption unless we make the best of digital technologies. For instance, in Europe, we have a big program in the renovation of buildings, and the Internet of Things is instrumental in making sure that we optimize the use of energy in buildings. So I could well see also there, when we work on platforms and issues around smart cities technologies, that this could be also something interesting from the point of view of Singapore, that has done, I think, very interesting elements also there in terms of how you design the city and the buildings. But more precisely, already things we have on the table were linked to, for instance, the next generation of microelectronics, where we want to have better microchips that are more energy efficient. We have a big program called as part of the CHIPS Act in the EU, and that's definitely something where we would like really to interact with Singapore and to see how our research efforts can go in the same direction there. To have better chips, it would have an immense impact on energy consumption in data centers and across the economy.
We have a very pertinent question next, and I'll ask Mr. Cleaner to stay with us to answer this first. And it is, how will the EU and Singapore address the issue of personal data protection, considering that the EU and Singapore follow two different governance frameworks?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part. With EU and Singapore?
So the first part is, how will the EU and Singapore address the issue of personal data protection?
Personal data. Okay, very good.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, this is, of course, a very important aspect. As you know, the EU was pioneering for the digital era, the GDPR, so the protection of personal data. And we have a framework that is increasingly known across the globe, and a number of countries now are getting inspiration for this. Indeed, we have had discussions already at the level of, for instance, our COVID certificates, in terms of how we can address possible nuances or differences. And I think this is something that will be very important in terms of data flow. So basically, I think it's something which is a challenge because this will have so big implication in terms of what we can share, how we can use also technologies that collect data. But I'm very optimistic that since we already managed to find solutions for this item on COVID certificates, that we can also do it for other ranges of technologies.
Would you like to add anything to that, Shun Long and Eric?
Yes, I just wanted to add that this is a really good question from the participants because it really helps to underscore the strategic significance of the EU-Singapore digital partnership, which is really to ensure that there's interoperability between our respective frameworks. And this is precisely why, building on the success of the digital COVID vaccine certificates and so on and so forth, for the EU and Singapore, if we can figure this out, then I think there's a lot of positive benefits for other markets as well. So this is a very important point. Thank you.
Eric, anything you'd like to add to this?
I fully agree with Thibault and Shun Long. I think, in Singapore, we have a Personal Data Protection Act. Thibault mentioned the EU GDPR. We have our PDPA for a number of years now, and we also, made further amendments last year to, of course, enhance consumer protection, but also enabling, business innovation. And I think this is the balance that we all seek to strike in terms of allowing economic competitiveness, but also facilitating a high level of trust. So I am also optimistic in terms of what tangible kind of products or tools that can enable trusted cross-border data flows between Singapore and EU.
And balancing optimism with the more practical road ahead, our next question is from a participant who writes in saying, many times you've mentioned digital training opportunities. How do you see the involvement of social partners and of trade unions? So who wants to go first?
I can maybe start. I think this is actually a very pertinent question. And in fact, I would just refer to another collaboration we have in the EU, which is with the United States. And we actually realized that also social partners had to be explicitly involved in our activity. So that's why we've launched a specific dialogue with social partners for the EU-US Trade and Technology Council. So for Singapore, I think that our idea is to be very open to stakeholders. And I think this really includes also trade unions. Do we have to create an additional structure? I'm not sure. I think the benefit of what we have on the table with this digital partnership is that it is a pragmatic and result-oriented framework, as we've tried to explain. But I would really underline that social partners are very much invited to contribute and to participate. We want to hear from them.
I just wanted to chime in to say that I fully agree with what Thibault has said, and that in particular, we will welcome suggestions in terms of how we can work with partners to multiply our efforts at skills training for the digital economy. I think Eric wanted to say something as well. Sorry, Eric.
No worries. There is definitely scope for non-government stakeholders to help with talent development and digital training. In Singapore, we do involve a range of industries in upskilling and reskilling, of course, the workforce so that they're more digitally ready. So this can be kind of mid-career training programs, or even kind of placement programs at our tertiary institutions that involve industry, so that it's more targeted and useful when they come out to the workforce. But that's just an example. But I think we would welcome more views and suggestions on how we can bring a multi-stakeholder approach to our digital partnership.
And keeping that spirit of dialogue and conversation going, our next question, again, a very pertinent one. How can the EU-Singapore digital partnership help SMEs in having more trust in digital trade? I leave the floor open, so I'm wondering who wants to go first with this.
Maybe I can go first. I wanted to share that we are approaching this digital partnership in a spirit of pragmatism as well as flexibility and creativity. So essentially, we're going to have an architecture that will accommodate a whole range of different cooperation modalities. So for issues that will benefit from, say, for instance, a use case that could be led by the private sector with some support from both the EU and Singapore governments, I think we can definitely do that. And in this case, if there are SMEs that have proposals or suggestions for specific use cases, please bring it on. Let us have the idea and we can work together. But beyond that, I can also understand how for SMEs, unlike some of the larger companies, for SMEs, clarity and certainty on the regulatory environment might be very important to SMEs. So again, in that case, we have a flexible architecture. We could accommodate that type of certainty and clarity as well. So for instance, if there are certain aspects of the digital economy, maybe in terms of electronic authentication, or maybe even in terms of electronic payments cross-border, if SMEs need that legal certainty and clarity, I do think we can figure out some way to give you that crystal clear clarity and certainty. It could very well be through some form of a legally binding mechanism as well. We do not rule this out, but it is something that we will have to develop along the way further down the road.
Thank you, Shun Leong. Would Eric or Thibault, would you like to add to what Shun Leong has just said?
Yeah, maybe I can just add, I fully agree first with what Shun Leong was saying. I think that this capability we have to indeed provide legal certainty, but also to make sure that there is a good understanding of the requirements in Singapore, but also in the EU is very important for cross-border trade. But I also think that we can learn from each other in terms of how we develop this in our own economies. For instance, the recent period with the COVID crisis in the EU has seen really an acceleration of a number of public services that are now fully digitalized. And the use of digital identity as a key to access these services is something we are trying to develop, and where I think also Singapore has been really pioneering some very interesting schemes. So I think that through this, we can certainly test what we are doing. We can learn from each other's, and we can also make sure that the SMEs in the end benefit from improvements and from deployment of these digital solutions.
Very quickly to that, also in terms, I mean, fully agree on in the terms of regulations on both sides, giving certainty to businesses. I think also taking a step back, also understanding, what gaps SMEs might have in also leveraging the full opportunities. So whether it's capabilities or resources, I think between both sides, we will look at what could be done. I think there are best practices that we can share. We could also consider exchange of practical toolkits that might be useful for SMEs, even for startups. This is the emerging tech space, like on 5G issues, how 5G could be deployed in different sectors. I think there are many opportunities that can also benefit SMEs, startups, not only the large tech companies.
Thank you, Eric. Many opportunities and many more questions. We will indeed keep this conversation going. The questions that we haven't been able to address in our session today, we will get back to you via email response or perhaps even a call. For now, I really want to thank our excellent panelists, Eric Chua, Shun Leong, and Thibault Kleiner, for their insights into this very important topic. This brings us really towards closing, but before closing, I'm going to ask you, Shun Leong and Thibault, to share really your remarks and your takeaways from the session we've had today and how we can build on this. So first, I pass the floor over to you, Thibault.
Thanks a lot, Deepika. And first of all, I would like to thank the participants, because I think that today is an opportunity to, as you were saying, start a conversation. But it is by no means the end of the conversation. So really for us in the EU, I would like to say that we believe this digital partnership with Singapore is a big opportunity, and we want to be ambitious. But we also are conscious that we have limited resources, so we need to be focused. And the way to be focused means that we need to hear from stakeholders, from social partners, where we need to put the emphasis, where we need to, have the attention from our scarce resources. And this is really where, you know, your advice, your priorities are for us also so important. But I really enjoyed this this session of Q&A. So thanks also to you for such a good moderation, I would say. And also thanks for the really interesting question. I mean, it shows also a little bit, you know, what is the starting point, and how Shun Loong was saying, now we are really busy trying to write this partnership and put it to bed. So this is for us also an incentive to be fast, but also to be well aligned with the priorities of the private sector and social partners alike.
Thank you, Thibaut, and Shin Loong, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think Thibaut has summed it up really nicely. So on behalf of both Eric and myself, both MTI and MCI, I just wanted to say that it's a true privilege to be working on this together with our colleagues in the EU. In particular, Thibaut's team in DigiConnect, they've been really progressive and forward-leaning, and also very creative in wanting to address a whole host of issues. We are not bound by, you know, traditional concepts and models of free trade agreements and all that. I think we really want to look at the specific issue in front of us and figure out what is the best way, what is the best modality to secure benefits for both sides. So it is in that spirit that we are also reaching out to the industry, to our stakeholders like yourselves. Again, very, very pleased to see all the very thoughtful questions from participants. I really look forward to hearing your views through the channel that we have established, the email address that we put out just now. Feel free to contact us, and we would like to walk this journey together with you. Thank you.
Yes, time to walk this journey together with you. Thank you very much, Thibaut, Shun Loong, and Eric, and all our speakers who've really given us excellent insights into the process and the way forward. We really thank our audience for the lively contributions and the excellent questions that you have posed. As you have heard several times during this conversation, this is truly not the end of the process. We warmly invite you to share any other questions, comments, or feedback that you may have. The email addresses are on your screen. We would encourage you, Thibaut mentioned some about the resources at our disposal. So if we gave you a slight timeline by the 23rd of June, this would really help us greatly, all the teams on all sides working on this process, to consolidate the comments and questions that are coming in and for us to get back to you. We value your feedback, and your input will contribute to shaping a forward-looking and successful EU-Singapore digital partnership. I thank you all on behalf of the many teams and many people working behind the scenes for joining us today, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.